The global race to control advanced computing capacity has triggered one of the largest industrial build-outs in decades. Trillions of dollars are moving. But this capital is not being distributed evenly across the world. It is concentrating into a surprisingly small number of geographic locations. As governments race to reshore critical technology supply chains, spending on semiconductor manufacturing continues to accelerate. Most investors focus on the companies leading this transformation: the chip designers, the semiconductor manufacturers, the technology giants dominating the headlines. But history suggests that when an industrial revolution unfolds, the greatest long-term opportunities rarely stop at the flagship project itself. A multi-billion-dollar semiconductor facility cannot exist in isolation. It requires land, power, transport, engineering expertise, logistics, and an entire ecosystem of businesses built around it. Many investors are watching the factory, but the more durable opportunities often emerge in everything surrounding it. To understand why value migrates into the surrounding ecosystem, we need to understand the physical reality of advanced manufacturing. Building a modern semiconductor fabrication facility is one of the most complex engineering projects in the world. The challenge is not finding capital. The challenge is finding geography that can support it. Modern fabrication plants require enormous amounts of electricity, specialized engineering, ultra-clean construction environments, reliable transport infrastructure, and highly skilled labor that cannot simply be created overnight. Money is abundant. Suitable locations are not. That distinction matters, because when geography becomes the limiting factor, the value of everything around the project begins to change. Every industrial revolution creates boomtowns. The AI economy is no different. As more projects compete for the same regional infrastructure, the constraint is no longer technological, it is geographic. And unlike software problems, geographic constraints cannot be solved overnight. When enormous corporate investment collides with localized physical constraints, capital creates a ripple effect. Value expands outward from the flagship project into the surrounding ecosystem. Rather than asking which technology company will dominate the next decade, long-term capital allocators often ask a different question: which assets become more valuable regardless of who wins? Historically, two ownership models have captured a disproportionate share of the value created by this dynamic. The first is specialized industrial engineering and cleanroom infrastructure. Every advanced semiconductor facility depends on an elite group of engineering firms capable of designing and constructing contamination-controlled environments. They build the clean rooms, the chemical delivery systems, the environmental control infrastructure. Without them, the factory never opens, because the technical barriers to entry are exceptionally high. These firms possess years of accumulated expertise that cannot easily be replicated. Their order books are increasingly supported by multi-year corporate investment programs. The constraint becomes the asset. The second ownership model is localized industrial real estate and logistics infrastructure. Advanced manufacturing depends on proximity. Equipment suppliers, chemical producers, maintenance contractors, precision manufacturers, they all need to operate within a tightly connected regional ecosystem. That concentration creates sustained demand for industrial parks, warehouses, distribution facilities, and strategically located commercial land. The factory may receive the headlines, but the surrounding infrastructure often captures predictable rental income and long-term occupancy from businesses that cannot simply relocate elsewhere. Instead of assuming product risk, capital owns the physical platform that every participant depends upon. Now, it is important to keep this framework in perspective. Not every technology hub becomes the next Silicon Valley. Some projects are delayed, others fail. Political priorities change. Capital cycles slow. Regional concentration creates opportunity, but it also concentrates risk. Diversification across geographies, not concentration in one, has historically helped long-term investors manage that risk. But when multiple structural trends continue pulling investment toward the same locations, geography itself begins to acquire economic value. Location becomes part of the investment thesis. If you only view artificial intelligence through a digital lens, you miss the geography that makes it possible. Every major industrial expansion creates regional winners. As unprecedented amounts of capital concentrate into specific locations, the surrounding ecosystem absorbs that momentum. The greatest opportunity is not always owning the factory. It is owning the infrastructure the factory cannot operate without. Technology creates value. Ownership captures it. The geography premium is emerging, and it is changing how long-term capital compounds. Every technological revolution builds another layer of infrastructure: railroads, fiber networks, hyperscale data centers. But every layer eventually raises the same question: who owns it? In our final briefing, we examine the next ownership layer emerging beneath artificial intelligence. We explore how AI is accelerating the discovery of new materials, reshaping intellectual property, and changing what it means to own the future. This is the Pivot Compass. Subscribe. Position yourself where structural momentum is building, and we'll see you in the final briefing.